Hey, gang, welcome to the Digital Utopia Podcast, episode 39. I'm your host, Frank Coel, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Joseph Freeman.
Today's fun because we're doing this on a new platform. We're going to be incorporating video, so you might see some of the video from this show start to come out, and I'm super excited about it. It's just dorky, nerdy tech stuff. No reason to share that with you other than I'm super excited.
It is fun. It is fun. And you look particularly good today. I mean, you look like you just got out of the gym, maybe karate-ing someone. I think that's how you say that.
I don't do karate. You know this, Joe.
But I don't know this. And you have a nice haircut. So I think we're ready to roll here.
Yeah, let's talk about the transition from MQL to SQL to opportunity. I want to dive into the nuances of that today, because I think what we're discovering as we talk to people in the marketplace is there's a lot of process or lack thereof going on that is creating a lot of opportunity left on the table due to what I'm going to kind of sum up as like laziness.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I'm going to throw that out there. The gauntlet has been thrown down. I'm calling a lot of people lazy, but if you're listening today and you're responsible for the outcome of that process, you know, maybe you're the head of sales or you're the COO and you're the one responsible ultimately for the flow to turn into customers, to turn into revenue. Let's talk about that today. We're going to talk about some of the things that are causing that flow to not be as optimized as it can be.
Yeah. And, so let's, I'm sorry.
So no, go for it. So jump in. Let's talk about first the logistics of MQL, what that means. Let's get out of acronym world. Let's make sure our listeners understand what that is and why that's important. And then let's talk about the transition as it is happening today, and then what the fix is for that.
Yeah, and maybe some context would help here too. So as we work through with different companies, as we work through their different lifecycle stage mapping, so understanding and agreeing upon what is a lead, what is an MQL, marketing qualified lead, how do we all define this as individuals within our organization, and how does this matter to the organization? We're finding a lot of individuals putting in their 2 cents around how it makes life easier for them. And how do I explain this? So as they start to create definitions around what's qualified and who wants to buy and who do I actually want to talk to and who do I want to send back to the marketing team so that they can nurture them more, we're finding that people are making decisions based on what's easiest for their day-to-day as the salesperson. And that is not really the right lens. What we want to be doing is making it easier for the customer or the prospect to purchase. And so if we're making choices about who gets nurtured and who gets talked to based on what's easiest for me in my day, we actually, back to your point, Frank, are leaving a lot on the table in terms of who could be ready to talk if we were just a little bit more proactive in reaching out to them at different times. So that's where this came from. And so now if we break down the MQL, SQL opportunity lifecycle stages, I think we'll start to uncover what maybe even in your organization you hear a lot and maybe a new way to look at things. So
yeah, I think one of the interesting things you said when we were talking before we started recording this episode is you said there was a particular company you were talking to where the salesperson said, well, if they're SQL, but they're not ready to buy, SQL being sales qualified lead, meaning they have budget, authority, and need, but they don't have timing, that person would like them to just go back to MQL status. And when they're ready, they're going to reach out and then you'll sell them at that time. But you don't want, to have them in your worldview. This is the salesperson. The huge problem there is, and you mentioned this, is that's all fine and good. And you think they're going to reach out and you think they're going to remember you just because they're getting your company's nurturing emails. But the problem is someone's going to swoop in and whisper sweet nothings in their ear. And that someone is your competitor. And that your competitor absolutely will be wanting to nurture them one-to-one personally. And so when that person's ready to buy, they're not going to say, oh, wait, you know what? This guy, Jimmy, that I talked to, 7 months ago, who I just vividly remember every day when I come into the office, let me give him a try. That's not going to happen.
Well, so even worse, your competitor's not going to nurture them. You're going to nurture them. You're going to get them all of the information they need, but you decided that you don't want to reach out and talk to them. They'll reach out to you. And oh, by the way, that's when your competitor is going to step in and for the first time, reach out and say, want to talk. And you know what? They've been nurtured to the point that they do want to talk.
Yeah, they're like,
Unfortunately,
you
they're not
know
talking to you.
what? Now is the time that I got to
And
get off my rear and do something about this problem that I have.
so you've
Yeah,
done all the nurturing work, and they get to reap the spoils. Is that how you say that? I don't know.
the
They get the benefit.
rewards. They get the
Yeah.
rewards.
Yeah. So we want to avoid that, right? Marketing qualified lead, MQL, moves to an SQL, sales qualified lead, moves to an opportunity, and that's an actual creating a deal
That's the
and putting a
progression.
proposal in front of them. So I think we should maybe break down. We did cover this in an earlier episode, but let's just remind people of what we think or have seen work well in terms of definitions for each of these. And actually, let's take it back one step before that to the lead. So we're talking in HubSpot terms specifically here, but these are very similar terms
Universal.
and acronyms you'll see in different softwares and different approaches to lead nurturing. But a lead, the way we would define a lead is your ICP, your ideal customer profile. So if they fit the high level demographics, we would call them a lead, and that means they have the right job title. They are at the right type of company, at the right size. They have the right number of employees or revenue number. They're in the right industry. If you are selling specifically to an industry, they're in the right geography. So it's all of the stuff that's pretty easy to pick out whether they fill out a form and give you that information, or you have a BDR run out and find it on LinkedIn or Zoom Info or just, scrounge it up from somewhere. You can get that information, fill out their profile, and you can pretty quickly decide without a lot of input from the actual prospect whether or not they're a lead, right?
Yeah, leads and MQLs are, people have to remember, this is qualified from afar.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, the analogy I like to use is if your ideal prospect is across the street, but they can't hear you and you can't talk to them, from what you can make out based on what you see and what you see them doing, does that look qualified, right? Based on what you see, that's a lead. And then you can observe their behavior from afar, then they become MQL. So go ahead and talk about that, which is the behavioral component that gets added to lead to then become MQL.
Yeah. So what we do once they're in the database marked as a lead, we now know that maybe we could sell them. This is, you're looking out the window from a big and tall store and you see across the street a 6'7", 300-pound man. That's a lead. Like you could probably sell to that person. Now, whether or not they want to buy, we don't know. But the lead then becomes a marketing qualified lead based on their behaviors. Okay, so we already demographically know they fit the profile. But now when they start making moves in the right direction, when that big and tall gentleman across the street crosses over to our shop and starts looking in the window and maybe even hanging out by the front door, he's starting to take some actions that feel like, okay, this person might be more than a lead. It might be actually what we could call a marketing qualified lead.
Yeah, the behavior, right? They're window shopping now. You can now observe this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can observe it. I mean, they're actually taking actions that you can write down and say, okay, they did that. They looked in the window. They came in the door. They started touching some of the clothes. These are quantifiable actions. And this is where I think we get into a little bit of trouble with a lot of organizations around lead scoring. We'll often get into an organization that has set up their own lead scoring. And often it's pretty complex. And more times than not, everybody at the company agrees it's worthless, right? You've got lead scoring set up to figure out how many times they opened an email, how many times they clicked on an email link, and how many times they came back to your website. And, all of these little micro conversions, which actually are all important, but you can overcomplicate that way too quickly. And what we recommend is take your leads and pick out just a few major activities that would be akin to looking through the window, walking through the door, touching
the clothes,
that clothing, right? Just pick out the best ones. Start with that for your lead scoring. Don't worry about all of the little micro stuff. And then if they don't come back to the website for 5 days, knocking them back down, like that stuff can be important and you can grow it into that, but just start simple. So what we usually say is what makes them an MQL is that they are a lead. So they match that demographic criteria. And they also have 100 points. 100 points. And how do they get those points?
In their behavior specifically.
100 points in their behavior. So lead scoring. How do they get the points? Well, we like to focus on a few big things. We like to focus on have they interacted with what we call a lead magnet offer. So this would be, kind of like a downloadable from a website, right? And it's actually, Frank, if you can, maybe we should stop and talk through, because I'm going to talk through the scoring against our blueprint. Maybe you can talk through the blueprint really quickly.
Yeah, the blueprint that is a tool where you can identify a specific buyer persona and a specific pain point that you solve for that buyer persona. And then what you do is you create various content and offers that address the various stages of the journey that your buyers just naturally go through. So that way, when they come in contact with your brand, you have something that's relevant based on where they're at in their journey, as opposed to being very binary, which is they're not buying or they are buying. And so you have different content and offers based on that journey. So when they're just a visitor, when they're just a lead, or when they're qualified, or when they're an opportunity. So you have these different things to cater to where they're at in their buying journey. But I did want to make a note on lead scoring. What I like to tell people, and you're right, most organizations overcomplicate this. What I like to tell people is that lead scoring becomes more valuable the more leads that you have that you then have to pile onto your sales team to sift through. So the point at which that ratio of leads to salespeople becomes big and it starts to become overwhelming, that it directly correlates to the value of lead scoring. Because what lead scoring will do is it will help you filter and lower the number of MQLs. And the reason you do that is because you want to bring it back down to a manageable level, because the MQLs get passed over to salespeople. And so that's where lead scoring becomes really valuable. So if you're at a point in your organization and you're not overwhelmed with MQLs, then your lead scoring, your behavioral criteria is going to be pretty low. It's like you mentioned, Joe, it's just going to be a couple of things, a couple of big actions. And that's all you need to worry about. If you try to go beyond that, you're asking the technology to do too much when you don't need it. It's like if you're going to go hunt, rabbits, you wouldn't bring like a big game elk gun, right? You just wouldn't do that. Like it's too much for the job. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing here with lead scoring. If you don't have this insane volume of leads and that ratio of MQLs to salespeople is not very high, you don't need like really crazy lead scoring setup. You just need a couple of basic rules in place.
Yeah. So we usually base it off of 100 points. Now you can pick anything that you want, but 100 is easy to work with. So we say if they are a lead and they have 100 points, that is what makes them a marketing qualified lead. And the way we get them that 100 points is we basically break down all of the offers and activities on our websites into 3 big buckets. Now this is oversimplified, but you'll get the point. The 3 big buckets being something worth 25 points. So maybe like a downloadable white paper, maybe a downloadable checklist, something like that. Something that is not high value, but it's interesting enough to your specific persona with the specific pain point. Now, if they download that and they download 4 of them, well, they've just given themselves 100 points because they were 25 points each. And so that might be somebody you want to talk to. They didn't show really high intent. They didn't fill out a contact form. They didn't call you. That's all true. They didn't do those things. But downloading 4 things from your website and visiting, clicking on a whole bunch of stuff, that seems like somebody who's interested in what you are pitching. So we would say that's 100 points because they did 4 25 pointers and you should talk to them or you should put them on the MQL list. Similar to that, we have the next level up that we give 50 points. And this would be their deeper dive stuff. So if they downloaded one of those lead magnets and now they start going and maybe they watch a webinar, maybe they start looking at pricing in a pretty robust way. They visit your pricing page several times. You can come up with what is a higher intent sort of activity around this or several of them and give those 50 points. So now if they've downloaded a lead magnet, maybe they download 2 lead magnets and they go watch a webinar. Well, now you've got 25 points, and the webinar's 50. That becomes an MQL. You should talk to them. Or maybe they go and watch a webinar and maybe in addition to that, they go download a high value case study and that was worth 50 points. That becomes 100. They're an MQL. Okay, so we've got the lower tier of 25. We've got the middle tier of 50. And then the highest one would be those high intent hand raising sort of activities, right? That would be fill out a contact form that says, I want to talk. That would be calling a phone number on your website. That would maybe be filling out a support ticket erroneously because they're looking to talk to somebody and they don't realize they're not a customer and they found anything that you think is them raising their hand to want to talk should be 100 points immediately.
Like request a quote, request a demo, request a trial.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Those things.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody who fills out a form, like a contact form, in that form, you should be asking them that qualifying demographic criteria, because that form itself is going to give them 100 points right away. You also want to know if they met your lead criteria right away. If they fill it out and they get 100 points, but they say, I'm a student and you don't cater to students, well, you probably still need to follow up with them in some way because they asked to talk to somebody, but you'll immediately know what to do with that. You'll know to send them an email and say, we're not a good fit, or you'll know that you only need to block out 7 minutes of your time, not a full hour to talk to them.
Yeah, you now have a subscriber who's not a lead, and they've met the behavioral criteria, but they haven't met the profile criteria.
Right. So that's still going to jump on your plate, but it's not going to turn into an MQL, a marketing qualified lead, right?
Correct.
Now, so far, what we've talked about is pretty automated. They download a form, it gives them some points, it moves their life cycle stage along for you. But now we're getting into the part where humans are involved in a bigger way, right? So they have gotten to the point where they've got 100 points and they meet that lead demographic criteria. And so now someone's going to talk to them, and they're sitting in the MQL stage at this point. Now, until you actually talk to them, until you get on the phone with them or exchange emails or something, and you have a good idea from that exchange that you actually could sell to them, they are not sales qualified. They are still marketing qualified until you validate that as a salesperson.
Yes, SQL is a human one-to-one validation, right? Because remember, if the MQL was about qualified from afar, SQL is qualified up close.
Mm-hmm.
Qualified up close.
And this is where we start to bring in the BANT criteria. So if you're familiar with BANT, it's budget, authority, need, and timing, right? If you have all of those 4 things, then you're probably pretty lined up for us to sell.
Really?
Yeah, you could be an opportunity. But at the SQL stage, really what we tell people is just look for budget, authority, and need. Don't look for timing. Even though most salespeople only want to talk to people who are ready to buy now, and I get that, the reality is most people are not ready to buy now. And you don't just want to throw them away. And this is where we started the episode saying, don't be lazy, right? If you have somebody who has the budget, has the authority, and has the need, but they say, I'm not really ready. Maybe in 6 months, contact me. Do not throw those back to marketing. Do not hope that those people in 6 months follow back up with you and reach out because all of a sudden they have the real need, they have the timing, and they remember you. What you need to do is, sure, maybe keep them on the marketing qualified nurturing queue. Maybe they continue to get that nurturing once a week or once a month from you. But you also need at that point to mark them as sales qualified because they are. Do not make an opportunity for them because there's no timing for that right now. But put in either automated or manually a whole bunch of follow-ups for yourself in terms of personal touch. Right. So along with the automated nurturing they're getting, they're going to be sitting as a sales qualified lead, and you are going to have a queue that reminds you every 2 weeks, every 2 months, whatever the cadence you choose is, to reach out to them and not just say, is it time, but reach out and say, oh, I found this cool article I want you to check out, or there's a cool trade show coming up. Do you know about it? Right. And find a reason to re-engage with them, because if you do not, again, you're going to be nurturing them automatically through those nurturing emails, and your competitor is going to swoop in and do exactly what I just said you should do. They're going to swoop in and say, have you heard about this trade show? And next thing you know, they're going to sell to them.
Someone who is an SQL, which they have the budget, they have the authority, they have the need, it's just they're not quite ready yet. Those are the people that salespeople are supposed to be developing relationships with. I mean, this is just good old-fashioned relationship-driven, value-giving selling. Right. So when you meet this person, you're taking notes like, oh, they like the Wolves. Like, I came across this great thing, tickets to the Wolves game. And, they're going to this conference I know in May. So let me, let them know that, I've got an associate there that they should really connect with. And let's get in touch with them a couple of weeks before and remind them about this associate that they should meet at this conference they're going to. Like, that's selling, that's relationship building, giving value until they are ready. To your point, Joe, you don't call just to say, is it time? Are you ready now? Like, nobody wants that call, right? So good old-fashioned selling. Stay in touch, become a friend, be valuable, and those are your SQLs. And so the sales team should have their own personal SQL list that, hey, these are the 100 people. These are the 100 people that I personally stay in touch with. I know who these people are. I'm keeping in touch with them. I'm finding out about what they need, and I know what their likes and their interests are. That's just good old fashioned selling. And so they are, to your point, they need to sit in that SQL bucket. And there's nothing wrong with them getting the marketing nurturing emails that can help provide ground cover for you as salespeople. But salespeople have to keep in touch and do the personal one-to-one nurturing.
Yeah, and by keeping them in SQL, what this is also going to do is show you if you are tracking conversion rates against your conversion funnel. It's going to show you how far people make it before they get stalled. And if they get stalled there for a long time, well, you guys as an organization have some work to do to figure out how do we re-engage them in a more meaningful way to push them along or get them out of there once and for all, right? But keeping them in SQL, there's no harm in that. Now, the pushback that we will get from salespeople on that as well, it's a lot of noise. It clutters my view. I don't want to see a whole bunch of people sitting and nurturing there. To which I say, well, if it's that big of a problem, filter them out. But also, you don't want to see a reminder every single day of all of the potential that you have in front of you. You want that thrown back into marketing world and just hopefully somebody over there. I mean, I get that. You want to kind of pass the responsibility back. And if it doesn't close, well, it was marketing's problem, but it's not. It's your problem, sales.
Well, this is where I think organizations, as they grow and mature, they can have a BDR role. Their only job is to get in front of people, and when they have BAN and T, then tee them up with a consultant, a wealth advisor, whatever that like AE role is in your company, the selling role is in your company. Then those people can just truly deal with deals. And that is actually a very good structure. But if you're a company where you don't have the resources to split that out, then as a salesperson, you're kind of doing the full spectrum of selling. You're doing the nurturing and you're doing the deal making. And so seasoned salespeople only want to do deal making, which I get it. It's fun. It's the highest ROI on your time. But if you're with an organization where you don't have someone doing the BDR role, then you've got to do that. You've got to do the one-to-one nurturing. But as organizations grow, they should definitely put someone in that role, because that is the job, keeping in touch with people, and especially those SQLs. They need that love. They need that attention. They need that personal hand-to-hand approach.
Yep. Yeah, so now they're at SQL. They have the B, the A, the N, the budget, authority, and need. They do not have timing necessarily, or maybe they do. Maybe now is the time, in which case, you know what to do with that. You're going to create a proposal, a deal, an opportunity, whatever you call it. Yep. You're going to create that, and that's going to move their life cycle stage from SQL to opportunity. And if you're doing your job and you have a great product and a great pitch, they're going to become a customer. Okay, so you know what to do from there. But I think where most people get stuck is that lead, MQL, SQL up to opportunity level. And what we see a lot of salespeople doing is just putting contacts in immediately and creating an opportunity out of it. And then the opportunity sits there and gets stale for a long time. And that creates for poor reporting. That creates for missed expectations. It looks like you've got a lot of in the pipeline, and it just sits there and gets stale and never closes. And so you've got all these missed promises, or, kind of quote unquote promises. Don't do that. Clean this up once and for all, and make not only your life easier as a salesperson, maybe as a salesperson, it doesn't get easier. Maybe it gets a little bit harder, but what gets easier is the fact that you can get some predictable revenue in there. You can start to finally see and project what's really going to come down the pipe in a real way. And you can kind of choose your adventure.
I'm going to interrupt you, Joe. Okay, I'm going to interrupt you. I think it can be easier if you implement this the right way. So I go back to what I said earlier. If it's harder on you as a salesperson because now you have more people and you're overwhelmed, then just tighten up your criteria. Just tighten up your lead scoring criteria, tighten up your MQL criteria. The whole purpose of putting in both the profile and the behavioral criteria is to create a filter. So if you find that too many are tripping and becoming MQL and you're overwhelmed, tighten up your filter. So this should actually make your job easier, but it does mean you have to get really clear on what's the profile criteria and what's the behavioral criteria. And once everyone agrees on that, then by God, these people need to be reached out to. These, by that definition, by your organization's definition, these are hot leads. Start to make friends with these people.
Yep. A couple notes on the technical implementation of this. So depending on the system you're using, there's all kinds of different ways to bring this to life. But one thing to note is we talked about them moving from lead to MQL to SQL to opportunity. Super important that they don't miss any of those stages, none of them, because as soon as they miss a stage, your conversion rates are no longer valid. You can't really tell where your drop-off points are. So what this means is that some people will come in immediately ready to talk, and they will go through lead, MQL, and potentially up to SQL within an hour, within minutes. It could happen very quickly that all happens right away. And then for some people, they're going to become a lead and sit there for 2 months, and they're going to become an MQL later, and that's going to take a whole year. It could be a longer timeline. But make sure that however you build it, they go through all of those stages. Another bit is at the MQL stage, there's actually a whole concept of lead status that we didn't talk about here that should be discussed at some point. When they're an MQL, it's not always that you can get them on the phone immediately, right? They've got their score, and then it might take days, weeks, months to actually get them on the phone. You shouldn't give up on that. You should have a prescribed outreach program there, and that should be tied to your lead status so you understand what attempts are being made and how far along they are there.
Let's do that on another episode, because I think what's really fun about that is how you can use some of these technology tools, specifically in HubSpot. What we do and what I try to encourage companies to do is to have 2 sales pipelines at minimum. So one is your regular deal pipeline. That's opportunity, that there's dollars associated with what's in there. But the other pipeline is, like a lower level pipeline, and that's your BDR pipeline. And that's where your MQLs go. So that way you can track the progress. Okay, we've got these new MQLs. Are we going through our standard process? Are we going through our standard sequence of events to see if we can get them on the phone, to see if we can get a conversation going, and see if there's that B and the A and the N and maybe the T, right? You're trying to progress that MQL through that process. A deal pipeline is perfect for that, especially if you set it up in Kanban view. And then additionally, you can set up automation to then change those life cycles that you just referenced as they go through that process. So now you're going to know exactly what's happening with your MQL. So I think we should talk about that on another episode and go into detail on how to get that done using a deal pipeline and then automatic triggers to change those recommended statuses.
Yeah. So bottom line here is let's stop building our processes and let's stop building our definitions around our own internal needs. Let's start building them around the needs of the journey that the customer is going to go through to get to your desired end state, which is a sale.
Perfect. Well, on that note, let's end this here. Next time when we come back, episode 40, let's talk about the nuances then of MQL and the statuses of those leads, and how you can use deal pipelines specifically for those leads, even though there's no deal to be won there. There's some really cool things you can do with deal pipelines and automation, as I mentioned. So join us on episode 40, where we talk about that and go into that in detail. Thanks for joining us today. Y'all have a good one.